In his own words, he mentioned to us that life is meant to be celebrated in the pursuit of excellence, in the pursuit of fulfillment, and achievement is nothing but a side effect. Yeah. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sachin, and Mr. UVC Rao was my father-in-law, whom I fondly called Daddy. Yeah? He was, in all senses, my dad, our dad. There are his children here, his family here, and on behalf of Kiran, Pavan, Rajiv, Amma, and the entire Uppaluri family, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all of you. It is indeed our honor and our privilege to have you all join us here today as we share and celebrate the life and experiences of our beloved father, our dearest husband to Amma, and I think a teacher and a guru to many of us here in the room. In fact, as some of us were looking through the agenda for today and looking at the participants that are here today, we wondered in amazement about the breadth and scope of all of his students, and we thought that if you were to put the entire ecosystem of his students together, we could probably solve any problem known to mankind. Because we have doctors here, all kinds of doctors are here. I'd like to get to know all of you a little better because with age, I think I might need your support. We have engineers, we have scientists, we have business people, we have educators, and we have professors as well. In fact, I think we're going to, if we are lucky enough, we're going to get a professor who's going to pay his tribute live because he couldn't join us today. But we looked around and we realized that we all, in many ways, are carrying his legacy forward. Because of that, I think his memories, his teachings live on. And teaching was his passion. In fact, it was his mission in life. And I think his students were the object of that mission. So perhaps I should start by saying, students, the class is in session today. Yeah? Or maybe fittingly, what I should do is maybe I should start this session with a pop quiz. You guys ready for a pop quiz? No, I'm only kidding. I'm not going to put you guys on a spot here, but I would like to show you a few photographs, and if possible, think about if you find something in common with these photos. Yeah. This one here, I think you know what it is. That was a sundial. This one is a lodestone. The next one, and you have to remember you're in Red Sox Nation here, so for all us baseball fans, obviously that's a baseball, but I really want to show up there, it's meant to be a curveball, and I'll explain to you why I put that up there in a second. This is a tuning fork, and then the last one is meant to show perpetual motion. Now you have to remember he was a physics professor. So if you can think about something that is in common with these 5 photographs, I'll give you guys a second, but the first thing I'm sure some of you thought is, this is somehow related to UVC Rao. And for that you get no points, but you will be right. If you thought about these pictures and said, it's all but physics, you would be right as well. But if you thought about these and were able to tell that these are also elements that describe Daddy's characteristics, his thoughts, his values, then you really knew the man. And I'm going to try in my own way to explain what I meant with those pictures. So if you go back to the first one, Shilpa, the first one is a sundial, which is humanity's oldest timekeeping device. Right? It uses the laws of physics and the laws of nature to tell time. It looks at the sun revolving around the earth. Obviously it's the other way around, but that's what it used to tell time. And Daddy was a very big proponent of the laws of nature. It uses the laws of physics, it uses the law of nature to tell time. And Daddy's fundamental belief was always respect the laws of nature, and everything that you do it in alignment with the laws of nature. The second photograph is that of a lodestone. Again, natural, world's natural magnet. Right? This is the magnet that you use, and ancient people would use it to look at direction, tell direction. And I think those of you who knew Daddy knew that he had a magnetic personality. But he did not use his magnetism, if you will, to attract things towards himself, but what he would rather do is he would actually look to his students and point them in the right direction, the direction of true north. And the next one, that of a curveball. I remember every time he would visit us here, he would be sure, particularly in the summer season, to join us at Otis Street, which is our local baseball fields, and he would watch all of his grandchildren play baseball. He was fascinated with the sport. He was fascinated with the curveball, and those of us who are baseball fans know that curveball is a work of art. But he was fascinated with the physics of curveball, because as the ball hurtles itself to the batsman, it's rotating in the air and it creates an air pressure differential with high pressure on the top and low pressure on the bottom of the ball, and that is why the ball curves dramatically as it comes down to home plate. And he would be fascinated with the simple physics of that phenomenon. But equally, and probably more importantly, he would be fascinated by the ability of the sport of baseball to sharpen the minds and intellects of young children. And for that, he was an avid supporter of any kind of sport. He was a competitor to the core, and he would be an avid sportsman. I'm sure many of you who have experienced him know about his passion for sports. So that is intended to display his passion for sports. And so the tuning fork as well. This is a pure physics phenomenon, right? The tuning fork has a perfect sinusoidal acoustic wave phenomenon that is used to tune not only musical instruments, but it is used to tune medical devices as well. So in its purest sense, a tuning fork is an elegant instrument that sharpens. And I think Daddy, in his own way, also really what he did was fine-tune the raw intellect of his students so that they could resonate and make waves in any medium that they chose, right? And then the final picture really needs no introduction. The concept of perpetual motion, I think he manifested that in real life. Here was a man who would constantly be in motion, always curious, never still, always energized, never dull. You know? In so many ways, this is, in my view, what puts Daddy in his life's perspective. In my view, he was what I would call a transformer. He would transform thoughts into ideas. He would transform concepts into applications. He would transform guidance into action, effort into outcome. You know, in many ways, he was really an alchemist, because he would transform, you know, like I said, you know, people with potential, raw intellect into hearts of gold. And that's really what we all remember him for. I remember my first impressions about Daddy. I met him first through Kiran, his eldest daughter, whom I'm sure all of you know. We both met in Clemson for graduate school. That's where I met Kiran. And when Daddy visited us in Clemson, or visited her, I should say, in Clemson, that's when he first found out that his daughter had a boyfriend. And so naturally, I was summoned to meet with him. And with a lot of trepidation, I approached him, because I really did not have the accolades, I think, or the pedigree that he was used to. First and foremost, I'm not a GT student, so, you know, that's one notch lower. Second, I am not from an IIT, then that's second strike. And third, I don't have the gold medal, right? So 3 strikes for me. So I was quite, you know, a bit of apprehension as I approached him. And as I approached him in the backyard of the apartment that we were living in at the time, now I was greeted with a sight that, as it turns out, seems to be a very familiar sight to most of his students. He was sitting or standing outside in the backyard, a cup of tea in one hand and a cigarette in the other. And apparently this is how everybody remembers him. So here I was, walking towards him, and I was prepared for the worst, right? But he looks at me, glanced at me, and I think in an instant he sized me up. And I said, this is not going well. But he looked at me, stared at me, took a few sips of his tea, and I'm waiting for him to say something. because I thought he's a professor, I'm going to get a lecture. But he didn't say a word. All he said to me, and I remember this crisply because it's 24 years ago. All he said to me was, "You take care of her, you hear?" And it was that stern, forceful, definitive statement that he made. And I simply nodded my head and got the hell out of there. So in an instant, I got the blessings, and that was my first impression of Daddy, and that's how I remember him to this day as well. So you may have gathered that he was a man of very few words, but he was a man of action. Over the years, I also found out that he was a very soft-hearted person, but he was a person that was unwaveringly resolute. Yeah? He was one man filled with passion. And I think you guys know this more than I do, because I only know him really as a father-in-law. I've been told many of you guys, I really got to know the man after he passed, because that's when you guys started to share stories with me. But I knew him to be a man of passion. He was a man filled with passion. But he was a man also filled with a lot of compassion. He was a man, I think, all of us knew to some degree, but I think very few of us knew the man completely. So, as we are here gathered today to celebrate and pay tribute to this great man, I would like to, first and foremost, thank you all for coming from all parts of the world and to welcome you to Mansfield, Massachusetts, to welcome you into our hearts, and thank you for being part of this journey as we look back and remember the fondest time in Daddy's life. Thank you.
I'd like to share it with you all. Tata was a great person, from sports to being a mathematician. There was always word around that he'd do something amazing, from founding GT to cooking a tremendous thing. He'd always make the right decision, and that too with infinite precision. His approach was outstanding for everything, and any one of Tata's students on a test would go ding, ding, ding. He always put thought into everything he did, and that even when he was a kid. He always dug in, from teaching to getting a win. Tata was always encouraging and most definitely pushing. Sir was obviously smart, and he always did his part. He could sing a beautiful song and at the same time correct something wrong. Tata was a great musician and created many a great composition. I was blessed to be his grandson, and it feels like I entered a raffle and won. Apparently he was just like me, which fills me with loads of glee. Physics was his life. It was almost as important as his wife. Sorry, young woman. He was a fabulous coach, certainly the best, and he'd keep on working without any rest. Surrey was a great man, and I am a huge fan. Thank you, Tata, for lighting the world up. You affected so many lives and made IIT say, yup.
Everybody. My name is Jyoti, and
I'm Vijaya. Good afternoon.
And I consider this honor that Kiran and Pavan have asked us to, have actually arranged this to honor our beloved teacher and guru, Mr. Chalpatra Garu, as we call him Sir, Chalpat in short, when we weren't around him, but he was one of the most inspiring figures who shaped us into who we are today. And
yeah, she's absolutely right. One of my biggest regrets was that I did not get to see him when I was there in January. All of us met up for a medical school reunion in January. And normally the first person I call is their house to see if they're in town, not in town. And we were there for a little over a week, but we were so busy catching up with ourselves, we didn't really have time. And I remember leaving and telling my mother, I didn't see them, I didn't call them, I'll have to do that when I get back. And then the next thing I know was the message that came in our group that he had passed. So after the initial regret, we started to contemplate. And she's absolutely right. You know, he meant so much to all of us. We're just the first of many, as you're going to hear.
So this relationship with our Guruji started in about 37 years ago. It was the year 1979.
1979, yes. I was 14 and a half, I believe, when I came in. And as Krishna says, I was more trouble than he bargained for also. I was his first student outside of the class, outside of his family. Shankar and then Suri were already his students at that point. So he tutored in the family. But yes, I was in 79 when we first met.
We spent a couple of years with him and several hours of the day outside of our schoolwork. And the sad thing was, I think both of us were two confused students in our 11th grade. And you know why I'm saying that we were confused, because we really couldn't make up our mind which direction, which field we wanted to go. We were two students who showed up to his place and said, well, we're interested in engineering and medicine. And he told us there's no schools for both of them together. You got to choose.
Actually, I went to him for IIT. But when I did get into medical school, he told me, that's a joke. You will never be a doctor. And I said, listen, I have the seat. I should probably do it. And he's like, what I've seen in the last year and a half.
So the first year, I think you and myself, both of us said, well, first year we have 2 years to decide what we're going to do. So the first year we decided, well, let's give engineering a shot. And of course, I think engineering decided they didn't want me, and...
Oh, they wanted me. I never went to a classroom. Krishna was my solace. You know, I was like, where are you? Where are you? You need to walk me to the gate so I can leave, because I never got to a classroom. I was in engineering college, never entered a classroom. That's
true. Vijaya is one of our classmates who actually got accepted into both, unlike me, who was turned down for engineering. So I think that's when we had, at least myself, I had focused more on trying to get into med school. I said, I'm not smart. Engineering is for the smarter kids.
But you know, Sachin, you brought up a very good thing. You know, the qualities that you mentioned, it's really true that perpetual motion. Let's start with the last one and work out this thing forward. We were in perpetual motion, but we were in chaotic motion. When I met Chalapatrao Garu, I had so many things on my plate. I always did. It drove him nuts. He's like, why do you need 2 dance classes and a music class and every freaking beauty competition on the planet and, you know, basketball? And then one time I broke my nose playing rugby in school. Oh, he chewed me up so bad. He was like, this is 3 months before the exam. What were you doing on the field? And this was the first time we took the IIT exam. And I was such a contrast to what he was used to. So, you know, that's why it was like perpetual motion, absolutely. He slowed us down quite a bit. I just didn't realize how much. Until I've gotten older, and you know, that was one quality that he definitely did embody. But perpetual motion with some purpose rather than chaos, like I embodied.
And he hasn't just touched your life and my life, he's touched members of your family. He actually was my older sister, who was 2 years older than me. He was her teacher in BSc while she was doing her BSc Home Science at St. Joseph's College. We went to the school, he wasn't our teacher, but my sister continued in college and he was her teacher too. And of course, she admired him and she also wanted us to pass on her condolences. And he very much touched the life of my brother, who I think was studying with him for 1.5 years, 2 years. And of course, my brother always claimed since he was a little kid that he was smarter than me. He was a year younger than me, but was in the same grade. And he, of course, like I mentioned, the smarter kids, I thought, went into engineering, so he went in that direction. But Sir had touched and shaped several people in Vijaya's family, and not just in our families, but he has touched several students. I don't think there's very many students in the town of Visakhapatnam whose lives were not touched by Sir. Students from many schools, from St. Joseph's High School, St. Joseph's College, Timpani School, which is where we both studied, Vishaka Valley School, where my brother studied, And I think from some of my colleagues from medical school, they came from Avian College, Bolea College, and several other schools. So I think the town was very lucky to have such a generous, intelligent teacher. And this is what contrasted us from, we were very proud of being from Vizag.
Yes, most definitely. I think, the other aspect that you mentioned, which is true, is he taught me passion for everything. I never realized how important that as a quality was. I continue to see just how much he influenced me. I have to say, I thought I processed a lot of emotions around death, but when I heard the news, I cried a lot. I cried a lot because I missed him, and it actually came to me just how big a part in my life he has been in so many different ways. He taught me the secret to learn. I mean, today I can tell you I can learn anything, almost anything I realize, and with age it's increasing, not decreasing. All because he spent so much one-on-one time with me to sift through the nonsense, get to what is important, and how do you file away information. He taught me those skills that I don't think anybody could teach. I honestly spent every evening in his house. Kiran and Pavan didn't get half as much time as I got. And even though I was sitting there, mostly chugging away the problem that I couldn't solve for long periods of time, he would go, Raji, and Raji knew to bring coffee, and it would just keep coming, and a cigarette would be lit up, and we'd keep going. And it would be the same problem for 3 weeks sometimes, And it didn't matter. Then when I went in to take the exam and my mind blanked in the mathematics section, I cried so hard. I thought my life was over because I didn't get into IIT. And I cannot begin to tell you, I tell my children this all the time. And then I saw other sides of him, because when he came back to visit me, because he had some medical questions, so he came over, he spent a weekend with me, and then he took off on, explain to me how this works, explain to me, and the physics of this. And then we had to go over all of that. That was, the last time I actually hosted him. It was beautiful. It was so beautiful because, I saw that inherent within me was the same thing that he had taught me, even though I was in a completely different discipline, and it had nothing to do, quote-unquote, with engineering. And then the game was, physics isn't everything. His motto was, physics is life. And I never, ever understood that until I started to work with him. And it helped me so much in my own parenting, physics and mathematics, with respect to his love for that. And then, when I visited him in Vizag, when he had built that, he had built those buildings by that road, the Century Club Road, the pleasure he took in showing me the design of the apartment and why the place looked like it did, and he went on into raptures about the science of the construction and the wind movements and the sun setting and the rising. And there are few people on the planet who embody that kind of passion, and that's the kind of life that I had always wanted. So I cannot begin to tell you how grateful I am to his family for sharing him with me. I am so grateful to be here. Thank you so much, all of you. My sister also was a student of Gangadhar Tutorials, but I got so much one-on-one time with sir. Including, of course, that meant he was also my harshest critic, so, that was good too. But it was the most amazing time in my life. Thank you so much. Thank you all.
Before I end, I want to thank Auntie, who we knew as long as we did, sir. And I remember Auntie waking up. We used to show up at their house at 4:35 in the morning. She used to open the door just jumping out of bed because of these very eager students who would just show up knocking on her door early in the morning. And sad, but sir would sometimes, we were supposed to end at 9:30, but the classes sometimes ended at 11:30, 12. But sir needed coffee every 1 hour. And Auntie was awake till whenever, and we'd like to thank you for playing such a wonderful role, and for every great soul, there's a better half to sir, and we think you played that role very well. Thank you.